So actually, I've just been always very passionate about public service. I actually took a couple years off before I went back to college, because I took 2 years of college and then I took some time off. And in that time off, I did about 3 years of volunteer work. I did it abroad and domestically, and I think that just kind of solidified public service and how I really wanted to work in that sector. And specifically, one of the programs that I did was AmeriCorps, and that really kind of drew me to public administration. And it was great because that's proven to be one of the great things about my experience, is that it's very much helped me to understand the administration process and public service. And one of the things that I would say I really enjoy is just the day-to-day interactions with people and finding out. It's interesting to see how people perceive government and what we can and cannot do, and so I always find it interesting to see what the expectations are. And also just the people that you work with. I genuinely love all the people I work with. They're tons of fun and they all have a great passion for public administration, so I think that is really one of the bonuses, that you work in a great environment with people who are really passionate about just making things better.
I grew up in the inner city of Chicago on the south side, and so was very drawn to urban issues from early on, and thought that the best way to contribute on urban issue kinds of stuff was in the public sector. And what I've always enjoyed, particularly when I was on the public side, was having a great deal of responsibility much earlier in my career than I would have had in a private sector job. What I've really liked about it all the way through is the variety in the work. I think all of us have said that. No day is the same. People think of public sector jobs as being kind of tedious and humdrum and routine, and most of them above the very entry level are not.
So I figure that I could have a bigger impact if it was more to public policy. So that lead me one thing to another to be more interested in the sector. And what I enjoy the most is that we can never lose sight of the big picture of what we do. Certain things of what we do every day might seem as not as relevant, but at the end of the day, it's about serving the people. And what you do there has an impact not on one or two persons, but actually on a lot. Because what you do is a reflection of the administration and how we want to serve the people. And that's a very rewarding feeling and experience that you can get through work, by working in the public sector.
I say that my first sort of inclination toward public health probably came in undergrad. I was a community health was one of my majors in undergrad, and it was something that sort of spoke to me right away. And similarly to what you heard from Eleanor, I born and raised in the city of Boston, so that sort of shaped my interests and what I saw, and sort of this challenge the status quo mentality. So my interests have often been also urban issues, racial justice, health equity, and my entry for that has always been public health. I see public health as sort of a catch-all for things. I think that housing is public health. I think that economics is public health. I think that all policy is public health. So, and one of my favorite pieces of that, I think, is that I'm able to sort of see direct change from what I see happening, what's being done by the people next door to me. So at the state level, I'm able to see the actual impact of policies being enacted, policies being analyzed, policies being challenged, and I think that that's been probably my favorite piece of working in this thing. I think probably our biggest challenges, as with many things, is funding. And because we are public sector, we're sort of beholden to a number of different entities. So we're very grant-based, so CDC dictates what we can do at this level, or maybe different federal agencies tend to fund our efforts. So it's an issue of, we know we have this great plan, we think we can do this great work, we have to be able to find the funding to support it, and we have to have the funding to support it long-term in order to make it sustainable.
There are a couple of things that I found frustrating about the public sector, and I loved every minute of it, so don't take this as a negative about working in the public sector. Public sector employees typically do not get the respect they deserve. The pay is often less than you get in the private sector. The stresses are at least as much as in the private sector. And the added stress is that in our society, there really is no tolerance for mistakes in the public sector. Mistakes end up on the front page of the Boston Globe. And that's an added level of stress that I think people are not at all prepared for. For me, the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives, but you just have to go in with your eyes open.
I think our biggest challenge, especially at the constituent office, because we deal directly with the people, is just managing their expectations. The city of Boston provides a lot of great city services to its residents, and because of that, we have very high expectations of us. Just the other day, because of all the different ways you can connect with us, like yesterday is a great example. Somebody tweeted to us there was a pothole location, and we're pleased because that's what we want. We want them to tell us these things right away. So we made the request, and 2 hours later, tweets us back saying, why hasn't it been filled? And it was a little, it's kind of funny because you're sitting there figuring out, like, how do I word this nicely that, sir, it's not going to get done in 2 hours? 2 days, sure, but if it rains, that's going to affect it as well. So it's really just managing those expectations, and this city is so great at responding to a lot of them that it's kind of a catch-22. We love that we're doing well, but at the same time, the bar gets higher and higher, and we want to achieve that bar, but we can only do so realistically.
I would say be flexible, just like Eleanor say, whatever opportunity comes that makes sense to you, just to take it. There's always time to try new things. There's always even time for grad school. Is that something you want to choose and change a career after going in one direction? So take what is in front of you that feels good to you at the time too. Because there's always time to just change the course.
One thing that's really important to understand is that for the most part, and your job is different than most, but for the most part, public sector problems are very long-term, and they don't get fixed quickly. I was lucky in that building a housing project can be done in years rather than decades, but solving public health issues, domestic violence, crime in the streets, all these kinds of things are decades-long efforts. So you have to think about whether you personally can deal with something that's so long-term. You also have to think about, can you operate happily in a hierarchy? If you're somebody who's thinking, should I go into the public sector or should I go work in Silicon Valley for Google, those could not be more different. The public sector, for the most part, is very hierarchical. There are lots of rules. There are lots of clearances. And you have to be happy working in that. I actually found it to be kind of a puzzle to figure out how to get around the rules, and it was fun, but not everybody sees it that way. So it takes a lot of introspection to figure out if you're going to be happy in that kind of situation.
The public sector is very good because you do have to deal with expectations, and you have to learn flexibility, and the big one I think is, like Eleanor said, realizing that the results you may want, you may or may not see for 5 or 6 years. And are you willing to invest that much time? Are you willing to keep going when you aren't necessarily seeing what you want to see, and just kind of have that, okay, in a couple years maybe we'll be where we want. If you like immediate results, then you might want to question if you would be able to handle the long-term results and the long-term goals.
Just to make sure it's something that you're passionate about. So public health is something I'm very passionate about, and that's the only reason that I can sort of get up and do what I do every day. And I do love my job, but this morning I was in a meeting and I couldn't get the internet to work, and and things like that just make me crazy. So the fact that I know that maybe tomorrow I'll get to do something that is related to chronic disease risk factors means that today I can deal with this software aggravating me or this laptop not working properly. So make sure it's something that you're passionate about and that's going to get you up and moving every day.
Being open to learn and understand all the complexities of a very diverse group of people in a certain place. that might be there for the same reason, trying to make better, work for the community, work for the greater good, but they might come from very different backgrounds, and it's such a big place to work, sometimes depending on the agency, depending on the office, that you need to learn how the diplomacy skills to navigate that while you're doing your job, and how to understand how to do it, how not to do it, and be communicative about it. There's never a bad question, a small question, and more so I would say public service, just because the impact that everything you do might have in the community. Attention to detail. Like, probably everyone says this about any sector, but I would say it matters. It matters how you do your work, how organized you are, and as I said just before, how communicative you are about something. I would rather have someone come to me every 5 minutes and ask me something than not, because the lens on where we are is such a big one that, as mentioned before, next thing, as sad as it is, we might be on the paper. And not just on the paper, but about what the perception people might have about us and about the work we're doing for everyone. So I would say attention to detail, very organized, and being very open about and communicative about your work.
Clear writing and clear speaking, number one. A passion, as a number of us have said, about the subject matter that the agency is doing. An ability to get along with a very wide range of people. In any of these jobs, and I'll relate it to mine because it's what I know the best, on any given day I can be dealing with low-income residents of public housing and representatives of bond rating agencies in New York and everything in between. You have to be able to deal with a very diverse range of people, both internally in the agency and externally in the world. And you have to be willing to do the less attractive parts of the job as well as the glamorous parts. And there are some glamorous parts, not a whole lot. And there are a lot of less glamorous parts. And you just have to be willing to pitch in and do anything.
I would also add time management skills, and I think there's no better time than when you're a student to figure out if you have good time management skills or if you need to work on them, and it's also a really great time to improve them. So I think that in public administration we all have our very specific deadlines or times of the year that are just way more hectic than others. So these sort of waves of times when things are going to get pretty busy and you might have to do what feel like a million things at once. So time management skills is probably something to start working on now for any job, but will definitely pay off.
But it's really helpful early in your career to have a job that's not a good fit, because you find out early on what you don't like doing. And so I would recommend that you keep a very open mind your first couple of jobs. You might find out that you love something that you thought you wouldn't, but it's equally valuable to find out what you hate, because then you can avoid it the rest of your life.
I mentioned teamwork, that's a big one, especially because our office, we get thrown so many questions, and half of which won't even be about local city government, it'll be about state or federal. So it's important that everyone kind of has this different bank of knowledge. It's important that we're able to use that with each other and just ask questions. So teamwork is huge in our office. Flexibility as well. Because our office is 24 hours, we're the only department in City Hall that is always 24 hours, you can always get someone. When things happen, we look for flexible people who can come in when, like the Boston Public Schools bus drivers decided to go on strike without notifying parents. We had to mobilize 20 people in our office by 5 a.m. And so having people who are flexible enough to be like, yeah, I'll be right there, it was great. And that flexibility usually comes from the passion, because they just want to provide service. The other thing that we look at is how you carry yourself. Professionalism, I cannot reiterate enough. Being articulate, being well-spoken, smiling, it really is those things. Presenting yourself professionally is going to make us want to get to know more about you and how you carry yourself. So that's definitely something we've been looking for. And the supervisor that I'm hiring with, she's been hiring co-ops for about 15 years now. And that's always the first thing on her list is how she perceives them professionally. Can they interact with people? Can they watch their tone? Are they courteous? Do they use appropriate language? Are they articulate? Very simple things like that.
People sometimes don't even know who they're interviewing with. And we have asked, more for the angel cycle more than the co-op, like, what do you know about the governor? Just to get a sense. Oh, I think he might be the first African-American governor in the state. This applies to anything. Do your research. You have to make us know that you really want to be there. Why you, not anyone else?
And I think just to follow on that, I think if you can go into an interview with a couple of examples of things that you've accomplished, either in school or outside of school, that's compelling because it shows, number one, that you've accomplished something, and two, that you've thought about it, and three, that you're somebody who values accomplishing something. Because ultimately that's what every employer is looking for, is somebody who's going to come in and try to get the job done as opposed to occupy a desk and collect a paycheck.
I would say bring with you your own sort of unique way of thinking or unique way of looking at an issue, because sometimes we all work together for so long and we go through the same steps together all the time that a pair of fresh eyes can really make a difference. And it doesn't matter that those eyes belong to an intern or belong to someone who, isn't necessarily familiar with our process, and that might actually be a benefit. So I think that it's really important actually that interns and the like get something out of us, and I think that it's a really important opportunity to find out what you do want to do, what you don't want to do, what you never want to look at again. So I think that bringing in your own unique sort of approach to things is what you can bring to the table.
Well, as Janica said, funding is always the biggest. And if you follow the political trends, you'll see which way that's running in any particular era, any particular administration. Funding is always a huge challenge in the public sector. If it were me right now, I would be looking to go into healthcare, because I think that's what's going to really explode over the next couple of decades.
If you're working at the local city government level, I've had the privilege now of serving under two administrations, Menino's and now Mayor Walsh's. That's definitely something I would say though you want to be aware of. As elections come, politics will change, leadership changes, so you have to be willing to adapt to that leadership. You also have to evaluate where you fit in. I know for me, being at Mayor Menino's under his last administration, it was very interesting to see the transition, and kind of everyone was holding their breath because it was the first time the city's had a new mayor over 20 years. But if you're looking at the local level, as even state and federal, obviously elections change and leadership will change, so you always want to be aware of that possibility that after an election you may need to look for another job, or you may have your job still, but that's always something you need to be aware of.
For public administration, I think it's very helpful to have worked first. Much the same as getting an MBA. It's helpful to have worked first because you can then put what you're learning into context in the workplace. Most public sector employers don't require a master's degree for entry-level positions. And often entry-level positions are the only ones you can actually get because they hire from within, and so they're filled, from people coming up through the ranks. So I think my gut feeling is it's better to wait a couple of years.
I actually went straight from undergrad, and I don't regret it for a second. And I will say that when I started talking about doing my master's directly, I had a number of different voices telling me, no, you have to get work experience, no, you have to do this first, or no, just go ahead and go to school. So I think that The only thing that matters is whether or not you know for sure that that's what you want to do. Masters are expensive, masters are a lot of work, and they're time consuming. Don't go, college is for figuring out what you want to do, master's program is not for sort of feeling your way around necessarily, because it's too short-lived, really, and it's way too sort of directly focused. So if you are positive, I was positive I wanted to go into public health, I knew that an MPH would provide me with the tools that I needed to do what I want to do. So I was 100% positive, and that's the only reason that I made the decision to go.
I think that's a really good point, because when I graduated from college, I was clueless. I was very young, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I was getting married, and I had other things on my mind, and going straight to school at that point would have been a big mistake. But I think if I had been in your shoes and I had known this is for sure what I want to do, then, you know, get it out of the way, and then it's done.
When I first got there, I didn't know anything about personnel. I happened to be there thinking the opportunity I had in front of me, and I said, okay, let's do it. Let's learn about this and how we can make it better. They say that background checks used to take up to 6 to 8 months. So someone might not hear about whether they were employed or not for that long. Like, how is that even possible? And I say there are many things that need to happen until that point, but now it's up to 3 weeks. Is there no issues with it? And we rely on very different agencies and police and Department of Revenue, IRS, and all that. But I always have in mind, like, what if I was the person on the other side? What if I'm the person who is waiting to hear about my promotion or about my hire, about all that? And keeping that in mind, we just decrease the time frame very considerably. And I'm proud of that. And I say, this is an impact on people, knowing whether they're going to have the job or not. And within our own circumstances, we're able to do it this way now.
I think in my case, probably the thing I'm proudest about was working on a housing development that rehabilitated 2,500 housing units in Roxbury, which was, that in itself sort of was a big deal, but the biggest deal was having tenants say that for the first time in their lives they felt safe inside their buildings. We didn't clean up the whole neighborhood, although we came close at one point, but really changed people's lives for 10,000 people.
When I did my fellowship in DC, I got to do some really cool things that might not necessarily manifest in bright lights, but I got to write a floor statement for the congressman I worked for, so that's sort of filed away. It's pretty exciting. My parents were excited. And I got to sort of go around and meet different legislators and ask them for support on this bill, and it was just a lot of fun. But I think that what I do now, as I mentioned earlier, my interest, my passion, a lot of my work has been in racial justice and health equity. So if I find that that isn't necessarily part of the conversation when I'm having these, well, maybe more high-level conversations about risk factors or healthy eating or nutrition or built environment, I get to inject that, and I think that as soon as just one person goes, oh, that's a new frame for me, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, that's a pretty big deal for me personally.
For me, it's probably two things. Definitely when I worked for AmeriCorps, that was very rewarding just because the team that I worked with, we had managed to hit numbers that the New York City school hadn't hit in over a decade. Because we worked in a quote-unquote failing middle school, and it was a bad middle school. It was violent, a lot of problems, bomb threats all the time. So it was a great time to be working for AmeriCorps and be able to see how your day-to-day work really gets to, over time, result to something, because we hit some pretty high numbers that we hadn't expected in terms of test scores and fundraising as well. And then the other experience I would say is at the mayor's office, I very much enjoyed the fact that everyone's so willing to help each other in different departments, that I've been fortunate enough where when a department will call and they'll say, hey, we need personnel down here, do you have someone who could help us with this software system, or who could help us with this? It's been rewarding for me that my boss, she always says, oh yeah, just get Janae, like send Janae down. So it's been very humbling for me that I've been able to go to all these different departments and meet wonderful people who are just as passionate, but also that they can look to me as somebody who can help in different capacities. So I get to learn, and I enjoy it just because I love learning new things all the time. So it's fun to find out what Boston Transportation has to do with their light signals and things like that. So that I'd say is very rewarding for me, is that you get to learn different things and that it's been recognized that I enjoy those things.
Well, my favorite tip is always tell anybody you see any place that you're looking for a job and what you're looking for, because you never know who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Second, if you know what general substantive area you're interested in, find out what organizations exist and join one of them.
For me, my first job, which was before this, was because someone knew someone or someone and someone and someone, and they learned about this opportunity, and they knew that I was looking for a job. And on the same line as how we were saying it, whenever someone asks me, do you know anyone for a position, I never think of the people who are employed or that haven't talked to me. I'm always thinking of like, oh, I heard about someone and someone who's looking to do a change or to make a change or go here or go there. So on the line, like, always talk about people without sounding desperate, you know, like yes, I'm looking, you know, because you can never know who is listening. And go close with the people that knows you the best, meaning it could be a list of 5 professors, it could be 5 supervisors from another co-op, something, and tell them about this and see who can you introduce me to. And if they know you already well, and if they give you an introduction to 1 or 2 people, you're expanding that and expanding that. But you started with people who already trust you and know you well, who will speak very highly of you with the people they introduced you to, and it goes from there.
Once you start looking for a job, it's like a job in itself. So just make sure that you keep it all set, keep it all organized. And I still have the tool that I use. So, and it's just on line paper, but I put down the date that I applied, the date the application opened, the date the application closes, and if applicable, the date that I can expect to hear back. What the job title is, what the job position is, where the office is, what it pays if that's shared, and who the contact person for that is. So sort of keep these things straight, because you'll find that you'll find a job on Idealist that looks really familiar, but you don't remember where you saw it and you didn't write it down. So just try to keep all those things straight, make sure you stay on top of the deadlines, and then you might even start seeing some sort of overlapping. So, oh wait, this agency has a similar contact person or a similar position, so this, I've found that these types of positions are open, these types of positions are things people are looking for. So just keep it all straight, stay organized, and that would be very, very helpful.